every single team has at least 3 guys on their roster that are fucking worthless.
Oh, yeah, totally. Absolutely.
You own Kenny Galladay. Take the chance on Danny Woodhead, bro.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another installment of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. That's right, I said installment. Normally we say episode or edition. I decided to do something different. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I'm here with my good friend, my pal, my drinker of Corona and limes tonight. I'm here with Matt Rogers. Matt Rogers, what's going on, dude?
Not much, Walsh. What is up with you? I have the precise limes. I have the podcast Coronas, and I'm also going to take a page out of your book, I think, and do something different in fantasy going forward myself.
What's
mix
that?
it up a little bit. Installments. No, I'm just saying you're going from episodes to installments, changing up the game plan. I'm thinking it's time for me to start doing the same, because if you listen to there's nothing better than doing a preview or a recap podcast after you did the preview podcast, and you can just reflect on all of your mistakes and everything that you said wrong and just address it straight up. So, it's got me in a mode of reflecting.
Yeah, that's what we're here to do. We're here to recap week 9. We're here to talk about all the things that we fucked up last week and a couple of things that we got right. We're here to break down all the news that you guys need to know. I have some thoughts on the podcast beverages, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on that. But first, though, I do want to give a shout out to BenchBoss. BenchBoss is the revolutionary app that allows you to play fantasy football live while watching the game on TV. You can predict the plays, the result of the play, and literally play fantasy football. And you can sign up for that beta now by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/benchboss. So, Rogers, I have to get this off my chest. So, normally, as you know, when we're doing the podcast, we have a couple beverages. I normally drink Budweisers, because they're classic. The past couple ones, I've been drinking Miller High Life 40s for some reason. But tonight, I ended up going to the liquor store, the little corner store by my house, to get a couple beers. And I was like, I'll get some nicer ones, some beers that I haven't tried yet, which it's hard because you go in there, and I don't know about you. Tell me if this is the same with you at your corner store down in LA, but up in San Francisco, man, you go to buy like a beer that you haven't tried before, and at least 95% of the beers that you've never tried before on that shelf are IPAs. And it fucking sucks because I don't like IPAs. I don't think they're good. And it's like, just get me like some craft beer, like on like the one night that I want to drink like a nice beer, something I haven't tried before. Give me like more than 2 options to fucking try. It's brutal, dude.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll build off that by saying that you actually, when we went, for those of you that don't know that listen, me and Walsh were college roommates, and you opened up my world to a classier beer selection, if you will. Not that it was IPAs, but just, that there's more than just Budweiser and like Busch Light, pretty much. You opened up my world. But still to this day, while I like to sample beers, and we try everything on the podcast. I've had podcast wine during mock draft season. I went with the Rolling Mocks every time. And when I go into the little bodega on the side here, I always kind of want to mix it up too, but I have no idea what the hell I'm doing with beer selection. So I don't like IPAs either. I just see IPA, and I'm browsing with everybody else like I know what the hell I'm doing. And then if I pick one to try one, since it's an LA like little bodega like on the corner, not near anything, it ends up being like $25 for a 6-pack, and then I just end up going with like Corona or Budweiser or something like that. So I totally feel you on that, man. Not only am I not educated on what types of beers that I would like, but there's not really a great variety, at least as far as IPAs and whatever the hell else there is, blonde ales, and it's all above my pay grade.
Yeah, dude. So, and I promise if you're listening to this, we're going to get to football very soon, but like, I got to finish this out. So I'm at the corner store. I'm looking through everything. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to get. And I see one that I catch my eye. I'm like, this is sweet. I'm getting that. It's a brown ale, which I like brown ales. And it's called Oaktown Brown, which is like fucking sick name. And it's also, if you can, I'm holding it up for you to see, The label is like real minimalist, and it's Brown's colors. It's brown and orange, and like Oaktown Brown. I'm right next to Oakland. Like all about it. Just everything about this is good. And so I'm looking for a second 6-pack. I'm like, I'll try a couple different ones, like drink a couple of each tonight. Then I'll have a couple for, another night, whatever else the case is. And I get this thing. I think it's by Founders, but it says it's a single hop ale. And I was like, all right, like I'm not looking for an IPA. IPAs have lots of hops. Single hop is less than lots. This is probably not that hoppy of a beer. So I get home and I crack one before, while I'm like adding stuff to the outline, taking some notes, looking up some stats, whatever else, start drinking it. It's like one of the hoppiest fucking beers I've ever had in my life. Like, how is one hop so much hoppier than beers that have lots of hops?
See, I'll be honest. I know, sorry to finish your rant if you had one, but I was just going to say that I don't even know really what hops are other than the commercials that I see. It was just like, look at all these fucking hops. And I'm just like, oh, that's cool. And I've been taught that like more hops equal like stronger in my face taste that I'm not like classy enough to have. So I totally get you on that.
Yeah, dude, it was a frustrating experience. I bought it specifically because literally every other fucking thing in there was an IPA. And I was like, this thing is like not an IPA. And then it is an IPA. Just tell me it's an IPA.
And for those that didn't see the label, that is a sexy beer label. I would definitely, for the exact reasons you described, I would have grabbed that off the shelf as well.
Yeah, I'll say this right now. It's called Oaktown Brown from Calicraft Brewing Company in San Jose. So if you're on the West Coast or that general area, give it a try. It's pretty good. Anyway.
Real quick, though, to wrap up your beer story, my equal failure, make it quick because we've ranted, but I did not know what I was doing, and the liquor store got crowded and more crowded and more crowded, so I just grabbed the Corona because I was scared of all the people that saw I didn't know what I was doing. And right when I get up to my dude behind the counter, Alfonso, we're boys, in front of everybody, he just goes, "You gonna go Corona with no lime? What the hell are you doing?" And I was like, oh, shit, Alfonso. I'm trying to keep a low profile. And I went and I got the damn lime.
You got pressured into buying a lime from the bodega. Damn, dude.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Well, now that we've done our beer talk, we will get into the Week 9 recap, guys. First, I do want to tell you if you do listen to the podcast regularly, please subscribe to us, throw us a review if you'd like to, and just make sure you're checking out the Let's Talk Fantasy Football apps available on both iOS and Android and compatible with your Amazon Echo. So, Rogers, let's get right into this now that we've spent some time talking about beer already. We're going to jump right into the news for this week. So the first item, Mike Evans is suspended for this week. Now, if you didn't see, Mike Evans really blindsided Marshawn Lattimore after a play. It was kind of like a fucked up thing. I didn't really see the precursor to it. Did not get ejected, definitely should have been ejected. But I think based on the other wide receiver fight news from this week, the reason he got suspended is because he didn't get ejected. So, one, what do you think about this news? And then do you think it has fantasy impact for us?
So I was actually going to ask you that question, that AJ Green, who we'll talk about in a second, actually got ejected from the game and will not receive any suspension. That kind of blew my mind a little bit. And I guess they're sort of counting that you got suspended for a half of the game, and that's kind of equivalent, but maybe Mike Evans didn't receive the justice. I totally am fine with it. I'm glad that it's a clear-cut one more than Zeke. His appeal was denied immediately, and he cannot play against the Jets, so that's good. As far as fantasy impact, I know we're going to get to Jameis's injury in a second. Actually, let's just get right into it right now, right?
Yeah, sure.
So Jameis Winston hurt that shoulder he's been playing through, and he's out at least the next 2 weeks. I believe it will be the first few games that he's missed in his NFL career, albeit very short. And Ryan Fitzpatrick will get the start against the Jets. I see you have a note here about his revenge game against the Jets. Oh, yeah,
dude. Fitz revenge game fucking gets psyched.
Though I think that qualifies for like half of the teams in the NFL that Ryan Fitzpatrick's probably played for. But besides the fact, it certainly, I think, has fantasy impact. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick is certainly I'm trying to think of the word because I'm an idiot right now. It's a very simple word, but he's certainly serviceable. It's exactly what I was thinking of, something that I am not, so that makes sense. It slipped my mind. Ryan Fitzpatrick is certainly serviceable. He can make fantasy wide receivers around him still relevant. as far as what it does for fantasy, I guess Adam Humphries comes into the conversation as a desperation, like not a bench ad, but it would have to be if you wanted to play him this week, I would think, right? What are your thoughts on that?
So I don't know if Humphries' role is going to change as much, and this might be me being hopeful because I liked him coming out of the draft, but my thinking is that Chris Godwin might start on the outside and they keep, Humphries in the slot. I guess we'll see, really, and keep an eye on the reports going into the week. But I like Chris Godwin a lot as like an athletic profile and as a receiver. So, keep an eye on it. I don't think there's a specific ad we really want. And I don't know if you're really going to be that desperate to start either Adam Humphries or Chris Godwin with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Maybe.
I mean, maybe in deeper leagues, but it's I don't know if it's necessary. I feel like there are other plays out there. Maybe one of them will make a good DFS play going into the weekend, depending on how the reports go, depending on what comes out during the week. But
that's a good point though, because I agree with you now that Chris Godwin would be the guy that would really assimilate into that role, whereas Adam Humphries' boost is maybe a couple more targets.
Right, exactly. So I mean, keep an eye on that throughout the week. In general, the Bucs have been not somewhere to get fantasy points. So I don't think we should be really overthinking this, just because if Mike Evans is getting one catch for 13 yards on this team, what the fuck are Chris Godwin and Adam Humphries going to do?
That's a good point. And just to bank off that, Deshaun Jackson going forward for this game. I know they'll get to it in the preview, but I mean, I feel like whatever your roster needs for any Buccaneers will be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Ones that you owned, like Deshaun Jackson, he's still a wide receiver, low wide receiver 4 for me. Cameron Brate is still a low tight end 1. Doug Martin, if you're going to roll with him, this shouldn't change it, right? I mean,
yeah, which we can talk a little bit about Doug Martin later on, because I don't know if I trust him very much going forward. But anyway, let's move on from this news. We talked about AJ Green. He is not suspended, so play him as you would this coming week. Obviously, he was disappointing this past week. I had him in my matchup against you. It did not make a difference. I still kicked your ass, bitch.
I was actually going to mention that if you listened to the preview last week, I discussed all the crazy moves that I was trying to make against you with Ryan Grant and Eddie Lacy and all these dudes. And the only solace I can take out of that matchup was that none of it mattered. I could not have done anything. You owned my ass.
I had a really good week this week, and I will say I'm wildly pumped on it because basically the first 7 weeks of the season I was absolute garbage, and I got a couple bitch wins. And then these past 2 I've had good weeks, and I'm really excited about it. Anyway, let's keep going with the news. Zeke has another hearing on Thursday. What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
I don't know what it means, and I'm fucking sick and tired of trying to find out what it means. It's shitty. Zeke told me that when I saw that Mike Evans, they were just like, his appeal was denied and he's out. I was so happy. And that is nothing that would make me so happy normally. The Zeke drama is terrible. The only thing that I could possibly say is that if you're a Zeke owner, just if anyone picked up Alfred Morris or whoever the hell, just try and get him on a low buy while he's still expected to be active, because that way that people probably picked him up on the hopes that Alfred Morris or someone would play. Try and just get him in a low leverage situation in a trade, just so you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, I think a great example is the guy in our league, in our main league, who owns Zeke. Before this past week started, he traded Sterling Shepard for Alfred Morris. That's like a no-brainer to me if you're a Zeke owner. It makes all the sense in the world to make that kind of move happen. And the guy who has Alfred Morris on his bench probably picked him up a couple weeks ago. He's probably sick and tired of this whole Zeke thing, and he's probably just as happy to get a startable on good matchups wide receiver for him. So 100%. That's really what you should be looking to do. The last bit of news that we have before we get into the injuries for this week is Jeremy Curley got suspended 4 games for PEDs. I don't think this matters at all for him. He has not been a fantasy consideration. What I think it does do is really give you a little bit more confidence in the target share of Robbie Anderson, Jermaine Kearse, and ASJ. Do you have anything else on that bit of news or that sort of thing, Rogers?
No, I completely agree, but I will say one thing that I've said a couple of times on this podcast this year, and Quincy Enunwa, if only.
Yeah.
I was so on him early preseason, if you remember. He was like wide receiver 3 for me, and just, I wish I could have seen what he gave to the fantasy world this year, because all the Jets have been a surprise all over the place, as a team, as fantasy value, everything.
And the thing is, too, I don't think they would have traded for Jermaine Kearse. So it would have been Enunwa and Anderson with ASJ at the tight end. And that would have been pretty fun because Josh McCown's been slinging the pig. Enunwa would have been an incredible receiver this year.
It's funny how going into the year, everybody thought the only fantasy relevant Jet will be Bilal Powell. And he's arguably the least fantasy relevant playmaker on that team for fantasy.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. It is pretty wild how that worked out. Let's move on to some of the injuries. We already talked about Jameis. He's out at least the next 2 weeks. Fitzpatrick is in there. Eddie Lacy left this game with a groin injury, the game against the Redskins. He did not practice on Monday. It's looking like he's not going to play Thursday. Thomas Rawls is expected to be the starter. That being said, CJ Prosise is likely to be active for this game as well. He'll probably take over the pass-catching down role. It seemed like Eddie Lacy was really kind of making his way towards being a viable running back in this situation. I don't know. What do you think about Lacy and then the couple guys behind him?
Yeah, I was going to save this for our famous whack-ass backfield section, but let's just jump into it now. It seemed like Seattle, which has been a huge whack-ass backfield, we were almost getting some clarity on who was going to be the bell cow. Pete Carroll, I trusted him, even though it wasn't his fault that Lacy got hurt. And he was like, yo, this is our guy. We're going to feed him and see how it goes. And that's rare from Seattle. And it looked like that was the case. So people picked up Lacy as a speculative ad. It made sense. And obviously that whole plan went to shit. So, I mean, I guess he started to show something to them in practice and things like that. It's a clusterfuck backfield. I honestly don't even know how it's going to shake it. Rawls is definitely the guy you would expect going forward. But to your point, not that anyone played Rawls last year, but his role, if say hypothetically, if you were valuing him as a fantasy start last week, he was saved a little bit with two late catches for some big yardage at the end, and that will not be his role at all. You said CJ Prosise is back in on that, and JD McKissick is still there to steal that work. So Rawls is definitely should be added. I'm not sure his role going forward. I would say, though, if you picked up Eddie Lacy, and while he may miss this upcoming Thursday game, hold on to him. Just because if this is only a 1-week injury and they wanted to go to him, he looked good in his limited time in that first quarter. So I would hold on to him at the bottom of the bench if you can afford it, just to see if they go back to the well when he's healthy.
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything that you said there. Rawls is a tough one for me to start, particularly on Thursday night. There's just something about that short week and a guy that I don't know the necessary workload for. We always used to talk about in college the Thursday night woes. Rawls could give you a hard case of the Thursday night woes if you end up starting him this week. So,
and I also feel like when a backfield is crowded like that in a short week of preparation, they're going to spread the ball around and not put too much on anybody's shoulders. That's just a guess of mine, but that would be what I would think would be logical, that they're not going to be like Rawls is going to get 15 touches or 20 touches. It's going to spread the ball around a little bit, let everybody get a taste.
Yeah, and it's always also important to remember that Pete Carroll is an asshole, so that's he's going to do whatever the fuck he wants, and he doesn't care about what you think or your feelings. So.
And when he briefly wasn't an asshole and told us the truth, God just was like, no, don't you go asshole in sheep's clothing, Pete Carroll.
Well, yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I've been convinced, and I've said this on Twitter, I've said this in person. I think Pete Carroll sacrifices a goat to Satan before every game, every single week. So. It would make sense that God would be a dick to him the 1 week that he tries to tell the truth. But yeah,
no one can prove that's false.
Yeah, tell me I'm wrong. Show me the patent evidence that you have that Pete Carroll does not sacrifice a goat to Satan before every single game that the Seahawks play. You can't do it. On to Des Bryant. Des Bryant has an ankle and a knee injury. He is day to day. I don't think it's likely that he's going to miss time. But does this worry you going forward with Des?
Des has kind of worried me all year with that rough schedule. If he's, if you own him, he's probably in your top 3 wide receivers, unless you got lucky with some deep flyers that worked out. But you got to roll him out there. The only thing that I would say is that if he's not playing at 100%, we saw in this past week that Cole Beasley got a lot of work again, and Dak started to kind of find his way with him, which is something I thought would be the case when Zeke was not on the field. And I think that that's something that could stay a little bit. Does that make sense? Not 2 touchdowns, right? You had 2 touchdowns this past week?
2 touchdowns, yeah. It makes sense to me. I mean, Cole Beasley's always the kind of he's the kind of guy who gets 2 touchdowns in 2 games a year and then has 1 touchdown for the other 14. He's tough to predict. I have a lot of trouble doing it. It would make sense if Dez is a little banged up, that he would get more work. I think he should be owned, certainly, and I'm very much worried about Dez if I'm a Dez owner.
Yeah.
Let's combine a couple of these into 2. George Kittle, he has an ankle injury. He is week to week. And then Trent Taylor, the Niners slot receiver, he has a broken rib. He is out indefinitely. Trent Taylor probably doesn't matter for fantasy circumstances. George Kittle, I don't think really mattered either, but Garrett Selleck is now the starter there. Does that matter to you?
That matters so much to me. Garrett Selleck is my streamer of the week all over the place, and here's why. The Giants have given up a touchdown to the tight end in literally every single game this year, including Tyler Higbee, who me and Shrek called on last week's podcast. Every single game, a tight end has caught a touchdown against the Giants.
And that,
I think that in the tight end roulette pool, I think that is enough to bank on if you're working at a streaming tight end situation.
I think that's a very fair point. And that's something historically that the Giants, this isn't it's been 9 weeks, but still, this isn't like a fluke thing. Giants give up touchdowns to the tight end. It's just the way they scheme their defense, and it's been the way they've schemed their defense for years. That's been a trend. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Garrett Selleck is a nice play this week.
Yeah, also a little update, too. I mean, after George Kittle, and even while George Kittle was still in the game, Garrett Selleck had 4 targets. C.J. Beathard is not really the greatest quarterback, but George Kittle is also already ruled out for this Sunday. So I think if you're desperate for a tight end, Garrett Selleck is a good waiver ad, as good of a streamer on the tight end roulette pool as any.
Yeah, I will probably have him in a lot of my daily lineups as well this week. Sticking with tight ends, Ryan Griffin has a concussion. He's week to week. I don't think that's particularly relevant for fantasy because Tom Savage is now the quarterback in Houston, and Tom Savage fucking sucks. Do you have any other opinions on that?
Silence.
Cool. Tyler Lockett, he did not seem to have an injury in this game this past week, but he didn't practice on Monday. Keep an eye on it. I don't think it matters too much, really, other than maybe a bump in target share for guys like Paul Richardson and Jimmy Graham going forward. What do you think about Lockett?
I actually read a very unreliable fantasy source with very few Twitter followers that I follow, but it was good food for thought that I forget the analysis that he put in there with numbers to support it, but he said that due to the fact that Patrick Peterson will be shadowing Doug Baldwin, if Tyler Lockett were to miss the game, Jimmy Graham may see some double coverage. Not that should really factor into your Jimmy Graham usage, but apparently they're thinking about they think that the Cardinals would go into a double team with Jimmy Graham over the middle with some safety help. It's kind of just something that I saw and I thought kind of was interesting and could make sense. Not anything to bank on at all.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. My initial reaction is that I don't really care because the rest of the secondary, besides Patrick Peterson, for the Cardinals has been absolute fucking garbage this year.
Yes.
And I don't know that double teaming Jimmy Graham is going to prevent him from catching jump balls over the middle, particularly with, people who have been burned all year. So I don't know how much stock I'm putting into that, but I think it's a fair point.
Yeah, your fact is definitely worth more than mine. I just thought food for thought, wanted to throw it out there. Definitely should not affect your usage on anything.
Fair enough. And then the last injury that we have on our list this week, Devontae Freeman, he's had a shoulder injury, and he's not really a risk to miss this week, but he did come in and out of this game through this past week against Carolina, and he did receive treatment throughout the game, it seemed like, or at least speak to the trainers throughout the game. I'm worried about Devontae Freeman. He really hasn't produced at a high level in several weeks. I'm not sure that I think he's worth starting every week. Is that too much?
I think it may be too much, but so here's what I'll say. I agree with you completely. One, the Falcons in fantasy overall have been relatively disappointing. I mean, Julio Jones is still a wide receiver 1, but based on where he was drafted, overall a disappointment for that value. Matt Ryan hasn't had a 20-point fantasy game yet. It's kind of weird. Mohamed Sanu, I should say, he's been fantasy relevant.
Oh, he's been great.
I shouldn't say that. But yeah. So to bank off your point, though, I would say that I'm still starting Devontae Freeman because I feel like the situation was slightly similar going into this last week's game. And while he still did not perform at a high level, I'm sort of angling this towards more if you want to get cute with Tevin Coleman, that Devontae Freeman went into this game banged up and was questionable at least till Friday and still got double the snaps, double the workload, double the carries. It was only like 11 carries and like maybe 5 targets or catches. I'm not really sure the exact numbers. I'll get them up. But I would say that Devontae Freeman I'm definitely worried about. I still will roll him out there if I own him because – I forget who they're playing this upcoming week. I think it is the Cowboys. It's the Cowboys. So I would, if he's active, I'm still going to – yeah, it's a good matchup. I'm going to roll him out here, but I would angle it more on if you're thinking that Devontae Freeman left this game for a little bit and that means that you should start Tevin Coleman, pump the brakes on that because that hasn't been the case even with a 75% healthy Freeman.
Right. No, that's fair. And I will say that I think Freeman has gotten a little bit unlucky in terms of red zone usage and touchdowns within the recent weeks. So that's probably part of it as well. But yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. We're going to get into some waivers, but first let's get a quick word from our pals over at BenchBoss.
This year, dominate your friends with free play-by-play fantasy football from BenchBoss. BenchBoss is the first play-by-play fantasy football game where you must think like the players and coaches on the field as you predict the outcome of every play. Earn rewards as you compete against friends and fans across the country. BenchBoss is currently recruiting beta testers, and we need you. Visit benchboss.tv to learn more and sign up today.
All right, guys, and we are back. That was our good pals over at BenchBoss. Again, make sure you are checking them out. You can sign up over at letstalkfantasyfootball.com/benchboss. Rogers, we got some waivers to go through, and we got a decent amount of them this week, it seems like. Some of them will be quick to discuss, but let's start at the quarterback position. And as you know, if you're a fan of the podcast, when it comes to quarterback waivers, we're talking about streamers because that's what quarterback waivers are. You're not really picking up a guy to start for the rest of the year for you. You're picking up a guy who has a good matchup this week. So let's start with Josh McCown. He is at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has given up a ton of points to wide receivers and quarterbacks this year. What do you think about McCown this year or this week? And where would he rank, I guess, in terms of your waiver pickups?
Never thought I would say this, but I am so down with Jets quarterback Josh McCown this week. Like
Downtown Josh McCown, dude.
Yes, I have not heard that nickname, and I fucking love it. It's a great matchup, like you said. Josh McCown has not had below 15 points since week 5, which is just streamer. Yeah. And his 2 bad games were in bad matchups, week 1 against Buffalo and against Jacksonville. So he's kind of the best that you can ask for a quarterback streamer is to just be relatively predictable. In a good matchup, are you going to get me between 15 and 19 points minimum, maybe blow up? That's what you want. That is what I think Josh McCown can give you in arguably his best matchup when he's been very, very consistent as of late. And what's weird as shit about Josh McCown, even though it hasn't happened in a little bit, he can get a rushing touchdown now again. That dude is tucking and running. There's a lot of blow-up potential with him. It's a great matchup. I love Josh McCown this week. I'd put him ranking, if you want to talk about that, I would put him like low quarterback 1. I'm putting him above guys like Kirk Cousins. I'm putting him above guys like, let me think, who are some other guys? Cam Newton. Probably in that range, though, if that makes sense, you know? I can't really think of anyone more comparable. Yeah, I'm right on him there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm all about McCown, and like I think this has been a theme with at least me and Vinny for a couple of weeks. Like McCown's a guy at this point you can almost just keep on your roster, and I don't think he's like really people are giving him that kind of respect. But unless it's a legitimately bad matchup, he's an every week starter, and this is a good matchup. So yeah, you're starting him for sure.
Yeah, he's quarterback 10.
Yeah, low end QB1, man. Low end QB1 downtown Josh McCown.
Love it.
Andy Dalton at Tennessee. We know Tennessee's a bad passing matchup, a bad passing defense rather. They're a good matchup. That was very poorly done on my part, but anyway. Joe fucking Flacco almost had like an okay day against Tennessee this past week. So that kind of tells you all you really need to know. I think Andy Dalton's in for a great game this week.
Yeah, my only thought on that will be logically it is. But when I look at streaming quarterbacks, like I said, what is your floor ceiling? What's this window that I picture you can get me? And I'm just always conscious of the fact that bad Andy can show up. And this is not hyperbole for me. That is a thing where in a bad in a good matchup, I did it too. I messed up the matchup line. In a good matchup, it is possible that Andy Dalton could just bust for no reason. I'm not saying that he's not a serviceable streaming quarterback. It's just when I'm valuing guys like, say, for instance, him versus Josh McCown, I think that McCown's floor is higher, even though Andy Dalton is just as good of a matchup. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no. If you look at if you think about who you think has a better chance of getting you 8 fantasy points, it's 100% Andy Dalton between those two.
Right.
He's almost in Jay Cutler territory in that regard, where like in theoretically great matchups, he still doesn't have a floor. So I understand that. I think this is a theoretically great matchup. I think if you can't get guys like McCown or the next guy that we're going to talk about, or maybe the next guy, I don't know if he's available as much in most leagues, but I think Dalton's an okay pickup. I think he's a worthy start this week.
Yeah.
The next guy we're going to talk about is Jared Goff versus Houston. I'm going to take a moment to pat myself on the back because I said he was the number one streamer of the week this past week. I picked him up in a ton of leagues, and he had 30 fantasy points. So I'm going to take the W on that one. I think it's another good week for Jared Goff this week.
I agree, and we just saw Jacoby Brissett and T.Y. Hilton completely tear up this Houston defense. The Rams have been great, and you can see what's good about them is with Jared Goff, when they go up and they're in control of the game, they don't stop throwing.
Yes.
Which they still feed Todd Gurley, but it's good that it's not a team where it's like, oh, we have a young quarterback, we're up by 2 or 3 possessions at halftime, we're still going to throw the ball, and they still throw downfield. And I will also say I'll take another slight L from you for last week, because when you said that, I was like, yeah, I like it, but I don't love it. And that's why I'm not that good at stuff.
You are good at stuff, man. You just got this one wrong.
Yes.
But the thing I like about this is the Rams are a 12-point favorite this week against Houston, which is insane on the surface level. Like if you had told me that in August, I would tell you you're fucking crazy. But that doesn't scare me off of Goff because, like you said, they're not afraid to keep throwing the ball. They also involve Todd Gurley in the pass game a little bit. This past week, Todd Gurley had 25 points. Jared Goff had 30. Like, the two of them having big games is not mutually exclusive. So I like Jared Goff a lot this week. It sounds like you do too.
I do. Quick thing I want to say, we don't have to analyze it. Mm-hmm. Coaches of the year coming down to Sean McVay and Todd Bowles, possibly.
I was going to say Sean McDermott.
Yeah. That's a great choice too. Absolutely. Oh no, yeah. That's the right choice. But I'm just saying the final, I think that's a conversation that nobody – I was going off the fact that nobody ever thought that we would say like Todd Bowles and Sean McVay are like top 4 for coach of the year.
Yeah.
Sean McDermott should win. You're right.
Sean McVay, it's like the crazy contrast between old man Jeff Fisher and Sean McVay is like wild. Like Jared Goff had one of the worst quarterback seasons of all time last year. And now he's not going to win it because Carson Wentz exists, and so do several other players. But like Jared Goff would be in top 10 for MVP votes right now, I would think.
Yeah,
that's how
I
good of a
don't
season
disagree.
he's having.
I mean, Sean McVay is making people in LA like football in the NFL, I should say.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, I always tell the story, real quick digression. But when I first moved out to Los Angeles, was right when the Chargers were moving to Los Angeles, and I bought a copy of the LA Times, and the front page in huge letters was Taco Bell will now serve beer at all of their Los Angeles locations, and the very, very bottom right of the front page was San Diego Chargers relocate to Los Angeles. That was not the story over Taco Bell beers.
That's classic. That's a great story. Yeah. Let's get through our last quarterback on this list. Cam Newton versus Miami. The big thing with Cam is that the past 4 games, he's averaged more than 8 rushing attempts per game. That gives him a floor. I'm down with Cam against this pass defense. What do you think?
I agree with that exactly. That's the only reason, though. And the bad defense and the rushing now becoming a little more prevalent in that offense.
All right, let's move on to running back. So the first one we have on the list, we talked about him really already, Thomas Rawls. I don't know if I'm comfortable with it, but it's probably worth a pickup, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth a pickup. I'm not necessarily a start, but I'd honestly put him at the high end of like RB4. I mean, he's going to get some work at least.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it enough before, I think. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of it. Danny Woodhead, he's supposed to come back, week 12?
11. He's eligible off IR week 11, and he's already practicing.
Okay, so, I mean, it's worth looking at, certainly, because Buck Allen has been getting the passing down work and has not been impressive. What do you think about Woodhead?
I think it's a situation where only if you can afford it. Like, if you're a good team that has bench room that you're thinking, I can watch this guy play for 2 weeks before I put him into my week 13 lineup or the playoffs or something like that. It's a situation where if you're fighting for the playoffs, it's not worth it to me, because when are you going to put that guy in your lineup and hold your breath?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. You got to have that roster spot where you're willing to kind of burn it for a couple of weeks. And, you got to have enough depth that you don't need to start him for a couple weeks. So if that's the case, sure, get him on that depth ad and see what happens.
Because you got to keep in mind, sorry, real quick, but he's only eligible for week 11, which means they could slowly phase him in. And if you own him, you're going to want to see it before you put him in your lineup. So you're talking maybe he gets full workload week 12, week 13 is almost a fantasy playoffs that you're playing him. So only if you got that wiggle room.
Right. And what is full workload on that team? Is it, 15 touches a game? I mean, it's not going to be, Zeke Elliott type workload no matter what.
Most definitely not. I'm saying the Ravens blow, and if we start to see that they're just willing to check down to Danny Woodhead all the time in these games at the end, then more than Buck Allen, then that's fine.
Right. No, that makes sense. Devontae Booker is the next guy up on our list. We've seen him really get an increased role in this Broncos offense the past couple weeks. The Broncos do fucking suck. Brock Osweiler is really bad. And CJ Anderson was hurt a little bit. We'll get a little bit more into this later on. But I think Devontae Booker should at least be owned. I don't think he should be started anywhere, but I think he should be owned.
I agree. I mean, people own Jamal Charles, and I feel like the reason that you own Jamal Charles is now Devontae Booker's value.
Exactly. That's the perfect way to put it. So keep an eye out on him. And then the last guy we have at running back is Corey Clement. He got a decent amount of work and he got 2 touchdowns. What do you think about this ad here?
It makes sense because he's performing at a level that is fantasy relevant, but when are you gonna do it again? When I'm looking at this point of waiver ads, it's guys that I think will help my team, because most of the time right now I have a full bench and I'm picking up guys off the waivers to start in my lineup because fantasy is so fucking weird this year. So it's you got to pick up guys that you will feel confident using. So again, if you have the bench spot to hold him and see if he ends up being the guy, they just got Jay Ajayi. He got the 2 touchdowns. He got the most carries on the team. It's nothing that I'm counting on. At the very best, I don't see him ever getting more than 15 carries in a game, 15 touches in a game, possibly.
Yeah, I'll be honest.
So, at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll be honest. I put him on this list kind of because I thought we needed to talk about him simply because he did get those 2 touchdowns and he did get a decent amount of work this week. He did lead the Eagles running backs in snaps. I don't think he should be picked up because Jay Ajayi is going to be that guy going forward. Like, they eased him in this week. He still got a 50-yard touchdown run. Corey Clement is not the guy to own. Again, if you have a spot and no one else is available, sure, might as well throw him on there. But what's really the likelihood of that? I don't think it's very high.
You're right. And to echo your point, I would say let that be someone else's problem.
Sure.
And then if Corey Clement is picked up by some guy in your league and he starts him and he plays well, you're not going to lose sleep over that. Fucking whatever. Good job, you Nostradamus asshole. And a real quick point I want to say, looking at Danny Woodhead's schedule, his fantasy playoff schedule is Cleveland, Indianapolis.
Ooh.
So if you look, I would say even just to get a little more specific on our Woodhead analysis, if you're a guy, and I can't cite any actual examples, but if you're a guy where you have running backs that you're running back to and you have really terrible matchups in weeks 14, 15, and 16 where you're like, oh shit, am I going to have to play this guy against Denver in week 15 when the playoffs start or something like that? Maybe then you can stash Woodhead because you can see it for a long enough period of time to know if it's worthwhile when the game matters the most. You know what I'm saying there?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good thing to look at. Take a look at your current running back schedules. And if they're not that great, maybe Woodhead's your guy there to at least take a chance on. And if it doesn't work out, like, what are you losing? You know, you probably dropped like
Marlon
Matthews.
Yeah. Like these guys that you're just hoping, right? Bottom of the bench guys.
You dropped Deontay Foreman. You know, it's like you're not like yourself over this.
Yeah. One thing I can guarantee is that every team, 10 teams or bigger, every single team has at least 3 guys on their roster that are fucking worthless.
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely.
You own Kenny Golladay. Take the chance on Danny Woodhead, bro.
Bro. Yeah. That's one thing in general in fantasy. I think people are not quick enough to cut bait with players, and I'm on the other side where sometimes I'm too quick to cut bait with people because I think everyone's replaceable. And
I am stupidly on the other side where I have owned LeGarrette Blount and Jonathan Stewart for 6 weeks and have not played them in weeks where I needed to. I started Eddie Lacy this last week instead of them. So once you realize that you have guys like that on your team, cut bait, like you said.
It's a good thing you didn't start Stewart because he got you negative points this past week, but that's another story entirely.
Right. Yes.
All right, let's move on to wide receiver. We got some stuff to get through still. I'm going to combine the 2 Bucs receivers. We already kind of talked about them, Humphreys and Godwin. Do you think we need to go more into them as far as pickups? All right, cool. No. Let's move from 2 Bucs receivers to 2 49ers receivers. We have Marquise Goodwin and Aldrick Robinson. They're both against the Giants. What do you think about these guys? Do you prefer one over the other?
I would say that I prefer – this is stupid to say since Marquise Goodwin had that 50-plus yard catch, but I would say I prefer maybe Aldrick Robinson.
I do too, actually.
Just because of the home run potential. And when you look at this, it's pretty – I mean, they were going against a decent secondary with Arizona here, but they each got 8 targets. They each got only 2 catches. So it's kind of hard to gauge, what the fuck that means. But I'll say, like you say, I'm putting them on an equal plane, and I say Aldrick Robinson has the best chance to catch an 80-yard touchdown.
See, I think they both have equal chance. I mean, they're both, incredible big play threats.
You're right.
I think Aldrick Robinson, to me, is I think he's just a better receiver, if that makes sense. But, I mean, not that he's really shown that in the NFL, but I guess, I don't know, that opinion might just be a bad opinion. Either way, you said it right. Both guys had 8 targets. I know C.J. Beathard's the quarterback, but, if a guy's getting 8 targets, he should be owned. So I'm going to go out and pick up probably Aldrick Robinson in a couple weeks this week, just because I think it's the right move.
Quick question. It's the stupidest question I've ever asked you fantasy wise. So I'll only make it one. Would you rather pick up Aldrick Robinson or Adam Humphries?
Aldrick Robinson.
Godwin? Yeah, I agree. Just to put it in context. I was saying just to put it in context for anybody listening. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we blew that, but I think the reason for that is I think Aldrick Robinson and Marquise Goodwin have value further than this week, whereas I think Chris Godwin and Adam Humphries maybe have more value this exact week. But once Mike Evans comes back, they're worthless again. So
that's a great point.
All right, Corey Davis. You know what? Let's save Corey Davis. We'll save because I want to talk more about the Tennessee wide receivers later on. I would say probably the number one pickup of the week for me if he's on your waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, he should be 100% owned. There's like we said, there's so many garbage players owned out there, like the Kenny Galladays and fucking whoever the hell. He should be owned in every single league. Yeah,
and we'll go into more detail on the Tennessee wide receivers in just a little bit. Josh Doxson, he's clearly a starter on this team. He got 5 targets, 3 catches, 59 yards. I don't know how much I trust him, but he should another guy who needs to be owned just because a starting wide receiver like that needs to be on a roster.
I agree. And one little point that I'll say is I kind of was that sentiment was confirmed in my mind when I forget what it was, maybe 2 weeks ago. The Redskins were on like Monday night or Sunday Night Football, and they were on like the 5-yard line, and Josh Doxson caught a touchdown in the back of the end zone. And I was like, all right, you're on the field for these plays. I looked at you as a big play rookie. Like when he first caught that touchdown this year, when it was like 1 catch on 1 or 2 targets for a 50-yard touchdown or whatever. It's like now you're going to be scrambling in the back of the end zone and Terrell Pryor's sitting on the bench. That makes it all the more attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. Corey Coleman. Sorry, go ahead.
One more thing. I cut you off. I'm sorry, but that franchise needs him to develop and be good. He is a huge cornerstone of them going forward. So that's something else to like bank on. You know, Aldrick Robinson is not a future pillar of the 49ers offense, whereas Josh Doxson is. So they're going to want to get him in.
Yeah, if nothing else, their division is already won by the Eagles, and they should see what they've got in him for the rest of the year. So if they're following that logic, then he should get a lot of targets going forward. Corey Coleman is the next guy on the list. He is eligible to return week 11 against the Jags. That's a bad matchup. The rest of the matchups are pretty good, and Corey Coleman has literally been good in like almost every game he's been healthy in. So I'm all about picking up Corey Coleman and stashing him on your bench.
I agree. But again, you won't know till after week 12 because the Jaguars matchup is nothing to gauge his value going forward off of.
That's fair. Yeah, that's definitely fair.
I mean, unless he goes off on the Jags, which would be very surprising.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, he's a weird archetype for a wide receiver, so like it's possible he could confound them a little bit, but I wouldn't bank on it.
Plus question right after that Jacksonville matchup, is that right around potential Josh Gordon return?
Yeah,
and
no.
If so, fuck it all, man. I'm done. I don't want any part of it.
That's a fair take as well. They'll both be coming back around the same time. Which one of them does better? Do either of them do anything? They're all valid questions. These are stash guys. You know, they're not guys you need to go out and get. They're stash guys. So keep that in mind as you're looking at your waiver wire this week. And then last guy I put here, just because I think he probably has been dropped a decent amount. Marquise Lee. What do you think about him, Roger?
Oh, yeah, he scored his first touchdown this past week. He's getting the most targets out of anybody on the Jaguars with Allen Robinson out for the year. I think Marquise Lee is like a wide receiver 4 or 5 going forward right now in PPR leagues. The targets are there. And like you said, you said before, I forget who we were talking about the volume of targets. And this story is the same for Marquise Lee, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, very much agreed. Got to be owned. I'm a guy who's dropped him over the past couple of weeks in certain leagues. I think he should be picked up this week. Let's move on to tight end. We talked about Garrett Selleck. He's our number one guy really this week. Greg Olsen, this is another stash, but he's going to be coming back. The Panthers got rid of Kelvin. When he gets back, he's a lock for like 8 targets a week, you would think, right?
Oh, yeah, that's why I would say he's less of a stash than everybody we've talked about that's coming back off injury or whatever the hell's going on.
Right, because he's a sure thing stash.
Right. He's been with Cam since he was drafted. I mean, he's the longest tenured Panther on that offense for sure. It would surprise me if he didn't get the workload that you just alluded to. So if he's healthy, he's a tight end one every time. I mean, we're talking about starting Tyler Higbee last week and fucking Garrett Selleck right now. So I'm very down with Greg Olsen going to a playoff push for sure.
He's eligible week 11, right? That's when he's eligible to come back?
I believe week 12, actually. He went to IR one week later.
Okay. All right. So week 12, it's, again, if you have an extra roster spot, you're not sure what to do with it, you're struggling at tight end, maybe you're streaming tight end. Greg Olsen's a nice pickup because he's probably on the waiver wire. Vernon Davis this past week had 9 targets, 6 catches, 72 yards in that atrocity of a game up in Seattle. If Jordan Reed's out again, I mean, Vinny and I said it last week, and I'm sure you guys did as well. He's an every week start when Jordan Reed is out.
Yeah, I actually 4 weeks back with Shrek said that Vernon Davis is my first ever tight end handcuff. That I think if you can afford it and you own Jordan Reed on your team, pick up Vernon Davis because you're set at tight end forever.
Yeah, absolutely. When he's out, when Jordan Reed is out, Vernon Davis produces. If he's still on your waiver wire, you can pick him up and play him this week.
Or you can play him when Jordan Reed's active because he's probably going to leave in the first quarter with a broken nail.
Also very possible. And then our last guy on this list, Charles Clay. It's been quiet, I feel like. It's been underreported, but he is supposedly on track to return against the Saints this week, despite not practicing on Monday. I'd be skeptical in terms of how much he's going to produce, maybe whether he's going to get full snaps coming back from this. But Charles Clay was great before he got injured this year, so keep an eye on it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else on tight ends, or are you good?
No, I'm good. We covered it.
All right, cool, man. Let's get into some cool shit and some weak shit, and then we will let you guys go. All right, so we were saying before, we'll talk about the Tennessee wide receivers. So the usage is important here, and this is the way it broke down. Rashard Matthews was in on 81% of the snaps. He got 7 targets, 4 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Corey Davis in on 75% of the snaps, 5 catches, 2 yards, 5 targets, 2 catches, 28 yards. Eric Decker, only 44% of the snaps, 4 targets, 3 catches, 21 yards, and that touchdown. So the big thing is if you saw Eric Decker and you're like, oh, he got some points, it's not worth picking him up. He was in under less than 50% of the snaps. Corey Davis and Rashard Matthews are the guys to own, and Corey Davis needs to be owned. Rogers, what do you think of those guys?
Yeah, I agree. He's the receiver that I trust the most because if anything, it will only increase his workload. I would think if anything, they might have been easing him back into it. And it's the same as you said for the Redskins right here. The Titans are going to want to see what they got. I mean, the division's a little more wide open there, but they got to develop that offense with all the youth that they have. And to your point that you said with Eric Decker, I completely agree. I value him the exact same off his 0 catches performance the week before because you follow that up with a veteran wide receiver on that team getting the fourth role, if you will, to Delaney Walker, the tight end, and those 2 receivers. Right. He's the afterthought. When are you going to play a fourth passing option that has been consistently awful this whole year? Don't buy into Decker. You said it well. I agree with all of that.
Yeah, this week did more to solidify the fact that Decker's not a worthy person to own for me than the 0 catch week did, honestly.
Also, did you see the touchdown he caught? Wide open.
Oh, yeah, he was just wide open. Like there was literally no one.
Long coverage.
Yeah. So the schedule the rest of the way for Tennessee is Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Houston, Arizona, San Francisco. So the big thing is those last 4 weeks. And we talked about, Arizona, they're bad other than Patrick Peterson. The other 3 matchups are all solid matchups for the wide receivers. I really think Corey Davis is a guy who might explode during the fantasy playoffs, really might help you out based on that schedule.
Yep. I think that he's at limited production right now.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. The next thing that we have here is Alshon Jeffrey. He blew the fuck up in a theoretically bad matchup. I will say I think Denver's pass defense. They're not the same pass defense that we've seen in past years. No. And just in general, the Eagles went nuts. What do you think about these Eagles? Are they legit? Is Denver's pass defense a fluke? I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
The Eagles are definitely legit. I think that this was slightly fluky for the Denver defense in the sense where you're still right that they're not what they were last year, but I still think they're a top 10 defense. It's got to be frustrating, and I give you kudos for Alshon Jeffrey owners that you've seen him bust so many times this year. And in a game where I bet you there's people out there that sat him on this because you're looking at him and
I almost did in one league.
Yeah. You're like, oh shit. He has not been what I drafted him for, and this is, unless I follow every single week heartily, this is one of the worst matchups he's going to see. And then he goes the fuck off. I think if anything, it's an indication that he's fine and he's still a wide receiver 2, and you got to roll him out there every week. But I think the Eagles are so legit. So legit. Carson Wentz is going to be fucking MVP. You said it the other day.
Yeah,
he's
dude.
Going to be MVP.
It's crazy too. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I knew it, but I hadn't thought it until you said it. You were like, dude, Carson Wentz is going to be the MVP. And I was like, oh, yeah. Fucking yeah.
There's no one else really right now. He's the front runner, and I don't think it's particularly close.
So good.
In this game, man, I was so pissed Ertz got pulled. I know I told you guys I threw a whole bunch of Carson Wentz, Zach Ertz stacks into daily lineups because I thought it was going to be low owned and be something that went off. And I ended up replacing them with Carson Wentz, Trey Burton stacks. And Burton caught a touchdown or whatever. But Brett Selleck had 5 targets as well. And you would think between Burton and Selleck, all of those targets would have gone to Ertz. So that would have been 9 targets Ertz's way and a touchdown. But anyway.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask real quick because any Eagles fans that listen, and I know that there are a few, I have a question for you that I'm ill-informed on. I was on Twitter and I saw a couple people, enough to have me raise an eyebrow, that said, thank God Zach Ertz is not playing right now. It's great to have a real tight end like Brent Selleck in this game. And my thought process was, what the fuck? And then I saw a lot of people echoing that statement. And I just want to know, I don't know anything about it, don't know why. If anyone is an Eagles fan that listens, tell us your thoughts on that. Email us, tweet at us. I'm very, very curious as to why everybody does not love Zach Ertz and think that he's going to be the best tight end over the next 10 years. But
you have to be not paying attention at all for this entire season to think that, because Zach Ertz has been one of the top 3 tight ends in the league, I would say, with Gronk and Travis Kelce this year.
I'm wondering I don't get it either, but I'm wondering if it has to do with blocking, yards after the catch, whatever.
Yeah, but what kind of casual football fan gives a fuck about tight end blocking,
Right, but that's what I thought until I saw a lot of people saying it in a thread, and I was like, I don't understand this, and I must be either ill-informed, stupid, or drunk like I usually am when I'm watching football. So I just want to know what people think about that. If you're an Eagles fan, you listen.
Yeah, no idea whatsoever. If you do know, please let us know, because that's puzzling, to say the least. All right, let's move on to the Colts. The Colts went the hell off against Houston this week. Do you think we can count on this going forward?
I want to ask you about this first because I have some numbers and stats, and I know that you're a big T.Y. Hilton hater going forward. I think he's the ultimate sell high candidate if he wasn't
totally.
every single week ever. But all right, you know what? I'll just jump into it. I'll say, what do I have here? So T.Y. is wide receiver 4, by the way.
Really?
In PPR and half point, but he's wide receiver 4, and that is literally on 3 games.
I was going to say he doesn't have more than 3 double-digit games, I don't think.
He has – so every single game that he has been in, he has either finished with 22 or more points or less than 7. And I say less than 7 because that was only once. Every other one is less than 5. He is more boomer bust than Deshaun Jackson ever was in his prime. You got to sell high on this dude. His schedule coming up is abysmal. If you look at it, I'm going to get it up while you give me your TY.
Oh, dude, I have it. It's his schedule right now.
Hell yeah.
It's Pittsburgh, bad matchup. Tennessee, great matchup. And then
Right.
Jacksonville, Buffalo, Denver, and Baltimore, all bad matchups.
Right. Dude, sell high, for the love of God, sell high. Trade for, I don't even know, trade for wide receiver or running back 3. Get rid of him. You don't want to do that to yourself in the playoffs if you make it, because you'll want to play him. That's all I got to say. It sucks riding that. I own T.Y. Hilton in 2 leagues, and oh God, it sucks.
I'll say this, and this it might be because it's the next people that we're going to talk about. I would trade T.Y. Hilton for Damian Williams right now.
Here's what I'll say. That would scare me, but I would think probably Damian Williams will have more points for the next 4 weeks.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. You got to try and prey on that. So that's a good point, because if I was the only thing is T.Y. If you drafted T.Y. Hilton in the first 2 rounds, you're probably an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So because of the whole Andrew Luck situation. So you're going to be a guy that thinks that T.Y. Hilton is worth, whatever the hell he did this 1 week. I would not buy T.Y. I would sell. Dude, I agree. Damian Williams, I couldn't sum it up better than that right there. That is like right around the bottom of what I think is logical and acceptable for him. I want no part of him.
Yeah, zero part of T.Y. or any of the Colts offense, maybe other than Jack Doyle, for the rest of the year.
Yes, I agree with that. And also for people that listen to the preview, I told them that I was in a league where I had to start 2 49ers and 3 Colts. And I started Jacoby Brissett, T.Y. Hilton, and Jack Doyle, and then Marquise Goodwin and Carlos Hyde. And I went the fuck off.
Yeah, dude, that worked out really well for you.
Dude, I went for a league high. And I was just like, slap it, suck it, slap it, suck it, all over the place. Sorry.
That's classic. All right. Let's
Sorry.
No, that is great though, because that worked out completely.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Dolphins running backs. We had Kenyon Drake. He got 55% of the snaps. He had 9 carries for 69 yards. Nice. His long carry was 42 yards. So, 8 carries for 27 yards. Otherwise, whatever there. And then 6 targets, 6 catches, 35 yards. And then we had Damian Williams, 45% of the snaps, 7 carries for 14 yards. Not much there, but 6 targets, 6 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown. They were both usable this week. I like Damian Williams more going forward. I think he's a better running back. I think the Dolphins will hopefully see that going forward. What do you think about these guys?
So I'll defer to you, and I'll make it succinct and say that I'm not right in saying this, but I'm very glad that I have no dog in this fight, because it's going to be stressful, especially with the rest of your team. And the last thing I want to say about it is, why couldn't this happen with Jay Ajayi? Like when Jay Ajayi got traded, I was like, okay, well, they had Jay Ajayi and they couldn't find any sort of run success with him. Why would I assume that it'll happen with anybody else? And it did, as you said, and it's split. I also think that there's just as much of a chance as the roles are the same as it's not. If that's not an annoying slap me in the face statement, I trust it just as much as I don't.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I understand where you're coming from there. I think Williams is the better back overall. And in situations where I don't know, I defer to which one I think is more talented. So I'd prefer to have Williams, but I'd also be just as happy to not have them in there. That being said, they both did okay. So, if you need to, keep giving it a try, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that one of these guys will be a top 20 running back each week. I'm just glad that I don't have to worry about it, even if I'm wrong.
That's definitely fair. Moving on to Alvin Kamara, he fucking went nuts at your expense, bitch.
Yeah, you put that in here just for me. That was not on the outline I saw this morning. And that's just you trolling me right there.
Oh no, you're 100% correct. Alvin Kamara had 42% of the snaps, but 10 carries, 68 yards, a touchdown, 7 targets, 6 catches, 84 yards, and 1 touchdown. He really went off, and it was great. I got to tell you. I would say though that Ingram this week could be weak shit if that's the way you're looking at it. He still got 60% of the snaps, so I wouldn't worry going forward. But he didn't really get any passing down work, only 1 target, and he didn't get in the end zone, which, to be a productive fantasy running back, you need one of those two things.
Yeah, as he shouldn't have gotten any passing down work because holy fucking Alvin Kamara. I told you the other day, and I'm going to say it again, when Alvin Kamara scored like his 6th touchdown of the game or whatever it was, I just ran out on my balcony. I ran out on my balcony and did a huge Alvin of the Chipmunk. And then a bunch of dogs barked at me and someone said, "You're high, go away," which wasn't true. But one thing I'll say about this, to your point about Ingram, is that me and Shrek speculated that after that 2-fumble game in the week before, in week 8, I believe, we were like, is Mark Ingram going to be in Sean Payton's shitty all windows doghouse, or what's going to happen? So to see him still have that lead back workload is enough for me going forward that it's okay to trust.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Despite the fact that he didn't really produce, he did get the majority of the snaps, and Kamara even fumbled in this one and still got work after that. So it seems like we kind of know what's happening with these two guys. They're both still starters going forward every week. Kamara just kind of got on the right side of variance this week, and you got fucked because of it.
Correct.
And then the last one that we want to talk about for cool shit, we kind of talked about it before, the Rams, man. I mean, everyone except for Cooper Kupp had a huge game. Robert Woods went off. Sammy Watkins caught a touchdown. Obviously, Goff, Higbee, Todd Gurley. They're a 12-point favorite against Houston this week. They're really good, and you should play a lot of people on their team.
Yeah, and normally my thought process would be those were big plays that they scored on. Don't trust it. T.Y. Hilton just put up like an 80 and a 60-yard touchdown on Houston, and they are big play susceptible for sure. So roll with them like you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Rogers, let's talk about some weak shit, and we'll start with some whack-ass backfields. Let's start with the Broncos. We talked a little bit about Devontae Booker, this whole situation earlier. This is tough. It's tough because C.J. Anderson looked like a great running back earlier in the year. He hasn't been for quite a while. This week, no running back got more than 40% of the snaps. Anderson got 36%. Booker got 34%. Jamal Charles got 30%. And then Booker and Charles got all 7 targets for the running backs. I don't know. Do you think there's anyone in here worth starting? Who would you have on your roster? There's a lot of questions here.
I would say Anderson and Booker should be the guys on the roster, like we said before about Jamal Charles. But one thing that I will say is that you just said no running back in a 3-headed monster backfield got more than 40% of the snaps. And that right there should be a no start anybody. Because in the earlier part of the season, even though C.J. Anderson, I think, is still like top 15 in yards per carry, something like that. I haven't checked after this game, but he's got he's over 4 yards per carry, so he has been slightly efficient, but there's a reason they're not going to him. And the Broncos were a much better team for the first 5 weeks, getting up on opponents and shit like that. We got Brock Osweiler and a little bit of a quarterback flux going on, if you will, and I don't see them playing from ahead, really, going forward. And when the snap count is like you're saying, the only way that you can start any of those guys, if it's like, for instance, when we're talking about the Eagles and you're thinking about Blunt and Ajayi and Clement, it's like, okay, well, how's the snap count go? And there could be fucking up some opponents and running the ball out. That's not the case with the Broncos right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, honestly, with how bad the Broncos offense is and how bad Osweiler is, I think Devontae Booker's the guy to own out of anyone on this team, because he's gotten some passing down targets. He's also gotten some running down work, or some first and second down work. It's like I don't see and honestly, from the eye test, I feel like he's looked the best out of the 3 the past 2 weeks.
I agree.
But go ahead.
Go on. I was going to say, a question that I will pose to you is, I have no numbers to back this up, and I'm just thinking about it right now, is that C.J. Anderson has had, years where he's drafted in the first or second round the next year, blow up years, bust years, this and that. Is it correlating with Brock Osweiler under center? When has C.J. Anderson had success with Brock Osweiler under center?
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea on the numbers on that. It would make sense
look
in my head that he hasn't. But But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where Brock Osweiler is so bad that they're going to be playing from behind a lot. And based on the past 2 weeks, they don't want to give these targets to CJ Anderson. So why would we want to play him at all? That's kind of the way I'm looking at it.
Yep. And that's been a theme with two separate coaches, which says something to me as well. That was a thing that happened in the John Fox era, and it's a thing happening now with Anthony something. I can't think of it.
Vance Joseph.
Vance Joseph. You know what, dude? I confuse him and Anthony Lynn on the Chargers so much, but Vance Joseph.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Let's move on.
The AFC West, dude. I'm in the AFC West territory now. It throws me off.
Yeah, no, that'll definitely do it. Let's move on to the Chiefs. Stay in the AFC West. This is one that might hit close to home for you, man, because Kareem Hunt only got 9 carries and 5 targets on 54% of snaps. Charkandrick West only got 1 carry. He did have 6 targets, and he was in on 40% of snaps. I thought this was going to be a blow-up game for Kareem Hunt. Dallas's run defense has not been great. I thought he was going to really go off, but since the first couple of weeks, Hunt's trajectory has kind of been downhill. What do you think about him going forward?
So first off, I own a shitload of Kareem Hunt. I think everybody knows that if you listen to our podcast, whatever. And I don't want this to sound sexist, so I'll make it gender neutral. But I'll say Kareem Hunt is the guy that you started dating a very, very attractive guy or girl, and they started to slowly gain some weight and become less attractive. And you're just like very hush hush about it, and just like, oh no, like that doesn't matter. Like we won't post as many Instagrams or whatever. And they're just slowly getting less attractive. And you're just like, no, this guy's still great, or this girl's still great. And it's happening. He's trended downwards and been diminishing in fantasy value. And to your point that you just said, when they were down in that fourth quarter, it was the Charkandrick West show.
Oh yeah,
I mean, the Chiefs were playing up the entire first half of the season, messing up everybody. But he's not scored since week 3. And it looked like, man, I can't say because I was getting very sadly drunk during that last Chiefs game. But it looks like when they're within the 10, they're rolling like triple option jet sweeps, Alex Smith rollouts to like the Anthony Thompson. Like they're not feeding what we thought was a bell cow for the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, that's fair. It's definitely very concerning, and it's like classic Andy Reid, where just like something's working, and he's like, "No, we got to fuck around with some other shit." but
right.
Also, I will say that exact scenario literally happened to one of my best friends, like over the past year, and he finally broke up with the girl a couple of months ago.
That's very, very great. I was hoping it wouldn't be any of our friends that just recently got engaged. I thought that was
no.
And then he asked her. Yeah,
it's one of my friends out here in San Francisco who that literally the situation that you described the whole time. I was like, this is him. But
right.
it happened.
Everybody's just like, oh. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you broke up with her. Exactly. See, I can't break up because the thing is, to that point, I'll literally bank off that real situation is that there's sell high articles and everyone's saying you should sell high on Kareem Hunt. If anyone's paying attention, his value is obviously the lowest it's been all year. And if you don't think, let me just finish my thought, and I want to know what your thoughts are after, is that if you are a good team and you're panicking on Kareem Hunt is what got you into relevance. Like, in our league that I own Kareem Hunt, my team would not be good and I'd have like 3 less wins if it was not for Kareem Hunt. So I'm riding or dying with him the whole way because God forbid you trade him away and the AFC West gets a little bit tighter and they start feeding him a little more. God, I would just, oh my God, I would be doing what I did with my last ex-girlfriend that did the exact same plump style and just start calling her up at midnight, very, very sad and drunk when I well, so sorry. I value your personality.
Yeah, no. The reason I said no there was it was me saying no as in you can't sell him high because he's not a high value right now. If you have Kareem Hunt, like you said, you are riding and dying with Kareem Hunt because you can't sell him at his lowest value of the year. And it just doesn't make any sense. Like, you have to hope that he gets back to what he was doing earlier in the year, or you're kind of fucked. That's basically the two options.
That was what I did in college. I went to college with a girlfriend, and the same thing started happening. I was like, I got to ride or die with you because I don't know what the hell else is out there. How I'm going to fix this otherwise. So you just got to keep going. Also, same with boyfriends, not being misogynistic here. Your boyfriends, I'm certainly fatter than I was when I started dating.
We're getting into Let's Talk Fantasy Football after dark tonight. But anyway, I think we covered Kareem Hunt well enough. Let's talk about the Ravens backfield. We did a little bit already, but I'll go through the stats for this. And again, this is going to get skewed because Danny Woodhead is coming back. But right now, Alex Collins getting 36% of the snaps, 13 carries, 43 yards, 1 catch, 3 yards. That's not great. Buck Allen, 46% of the snaps, 7 carries, 21 yards, 8 targets, 7 catches, 44 yards. And then Bobby Rainey getting 18% of the snaps and getting 0 yards on 4 touches. So I don't think you need to worry about Bobby Rainey. But what do you think about Alex Collins? Like, do you think if their schedule is good? Because here's my thought, is that if their schedule is good, you can probably start Alex Collins. Like if they're a favorite, like if they're a Vegas favorite, you can start Alex Collins. If not, I don't think you can start anyone.
I agree, because just I'll make it quick. Is that John Harbaugh? Within the last 2 weeks, I forget what it was, said that Alex Collins was going to get more work and be the guy going forward, and he knows that Danny Woodhead is coming back. So why would you say that? And Alex Collins has played well, at least, moderately above expectations in that role. So why would you do that or say that and not make him the, he's the runner. Like you said, I'm worried about Buck Allen going forward with Danny Woodhead coming back, but I don't think it should really impact any of Alex Collins' workload at all. And he's looked good, man, to the eye test especially.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens there. I own Collins in a couple leagues. I'm playing him based on matchups. So just keep an eye out there. And then we kind of talked about the Eagles, how we think Ajayi's the guy. Do you think we need to revisit that at all, or are we good?
I don't think we have to. I'll just ask you, without looking at the matchup, are you putting any of these guys in your lineup going into next week without looking at who they're playing?
Eagles?
Yeah.
Ajayi.
No, right, like I'm saying, will you, or any of them? Like Ajayi will maybe find lineups if it works for them, but anybody, I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm just playing Ajayi.
Cool. Yeah, okay, cool. I agree. Sorry, I made that harder than it had to be.
No, it's cool. It happens. We talked about how Seattle kind of got their weird situation. I think that's been covered. We talked a little bit about AJ Green as well. I don't think we need to talk about that. I'm going to let you go off on the Packers, man.
Yeah, I'll try and not ramble too much, but if you watch the Monday night game, that's true. Yeah, we're at like 5 hours. Yeah. I'm not sure it's not 6 a.m., but all I want to say is that if you own Packers and you're worried about them, Brett Hundley is the guy, barring injury. It will not change. Mike McCarthy has said it way too much for it to change, so get used to this. If you watch this game Monday night, it was pathetic. And one thing I want to say is it was bad. And what's worse about it is it's the healthiest the O-line has been all year. And they actually played very, very well. They lose Brian Bulaga, the beluga whale, who's always hurt, to a torn ACL for the year, which sucks. But the offensive line, if you went back and looked at that game, a lot of the trouble that Brett Hundley looked like he was in was on his own accord, from scrambling and bailing out on plays right away. Granted, Mike McCarthy wasn't calling any plays that resulted in more than a 3-yard slant or an out route or a flat route or something like that. But I don't think this is going to change. So what I want to propose to you, Walsh, is Brett Hundley is the guy. He hasn't turned the ball over, and the targets are still there for Adams and Jordy. But there's so much different targets than Rodgers targets and what you drafted them for. So like Devontae Adams will get 11 targets a game. That could result in pretty much what happened this last week of like 6 catches for 45 yards. Is it crazy to say that, and then we'll get to the running game in a minute, is it crazy to say that Randall Cobb is the most valuable Packers wide receiver going forward in PPR?
I think it's really matchup dependent, but I don't think you're necessarily wrong on that. Hundley hasn't really shown anything that would make me think that he's willing to target the outside receivers.
See, that's it. That is it exactly. That's why I value Cobb the most, because he looks once, he does a 1-2, and then the play is over. And maybe he'll dump it over the middle. And it happened the whole game, and it's an issue that they're trying to address. And he will not go away.
This is something that's outside of like all the wide receiver value, but he has Kaepernick syndrome where he looks once, he looks twice, and then he bails. And he bails on clean pockets. He bails on situations where he doesn't need to bail. He just bails for the sake of like in his internal clock is saying to bail. And that's exactly when Kaepernick was starting and doing everything. I was like, this is this guy's fucking issue, is he bails on clean pockets and he bails when he doesn't have to. And Hundley's doing the exact same thing.
And that's a great point too, because honestly, it's an issue that they're trying to address as well, because the Packers as a whole, I feel like, are so used to bad O-line play. And if you're watching Aaron Rodgers, you see him roll out of the pocket, but he's a master of the game. So I feel like Brett Hundley is almost like, this is going to collapse on me, and I got to figure out what the hell to do. And I don't think it's going to change. And the thing with Jordy Nelson is what people don't realize is Jordy Nelson, half of his fantasy production for the past 4 years was once the play was broken down and his chemistry with Rodgers scrambling all over the place and figuring out that, which is not there with Hundley. So honestly, going forward in PPR leagues, full PPR leagues, I'm valuing these wide receivers as Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson. Just because Jordy Nelson was a touchdown machine. That's why he was a top 10 wide receiver every year, and I don't see it happening. And Devontae Adams is getting more targets. The whole field has shrunk now, and McCarthy is going to baby and coddle Brett Hundley. And I really don't see it changing. And really, sorry, I am rambling like I promised I wouldn't, but I want to see him just give him the whole playbook. The Packers aren't making the playoffs this year at all without Aaron Rodgers. See what you got with Brett Hundley. Let him sling it. He missed a couple long throws, but I just don't see it happening. I think the short game is there. And like you made a great point, he is not looking outside the hashes at all.
Yeah, I think what I will say in terms of the fantasy value of the Packers receivers, I think you're probably right in terms of Cobb is the most valuable one. I don't really know, but I think you're probably right on that. I don't think any single Packers receiver is a must start for the rest of the year in fantasy.
I was actually going to say that they all are must starts, and now I think that opened my eyes to no, they're not. They're actually not.
They're all high ceiling guys, but really low floor guys.
Because here's the thing. Brett Hundley is never going to throw, I mean, unless there's an anomaly, obviously, or an outlier situation here, but Brett Hundley is not going to throw more than 2 touchdowns in a game.
Right.
And it could go anywhere. So how do you predict that or try and forecast that situation? I don't like it at all.
Yeah, I mean, think of it.
I'm glad I have no part of it.
What do you like better, like Jordy Nelson on a random week or Marquise Lee in a good matchup?
Marquise Lee.
Yeah, like that's
close. It's very, very close. It's very, very close. But
that's
your
all
point.
That's a conversation,
right? Exactly, and the fact that it is a conversation should convince you towards logic. That's what I was just going to base off your point, is that the fact that you're weighing Marquise Lee for Jordy Nelson means that Marquise Lee is a smarter play. You got to go logic at that point. Because someone will catch a touchdown on the Packers. Good luck fucking figuring that out. The only thing that I'll say is that they should be playing down a lot. They should be playing from behind, and Brett Hundley has been efficient. Also, the last thing I'll say is that this was a weird game in the sense where the Lions were just mounting like 9-minute drives, and they had like their lowest snap count, all the Packers, of the entire year. They barely had the ball. I don't think that really affects what we're talking about, but if you're going to sit Jordy Nelson this week against the Bears, I don't hate it. If there's someone, I would say, though, play someone over Jordy Nelson instead of sitting Jordy Nelson. Does that make sense?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. You're not going out of your way to sit Jordy, but if there's someone on your bench who you think has a good matchup, who you think has a good chance of scoring some points, do it.
Right. I'm in a league where I'm playing Marvin Jones over Jordy Nelson this upcoming week.
And I think that's very fair.
Right. So that's all I want to say. And then just to get to the backfield, I'll just keep on rambling.
Yeah, do it.
What the fuck, man? Aaron Jones has looked great all year. Ty Montgomery is their guy. Mike McCarthy loves him. They want to stand by their statement, I feel like, of making him the feature back. And it's just not going to happen. He's not durable enough. And if you're a fan, you're just looking, it's not going to happen. But they split touches. Aaron Jones went missing for a very long time. I think for those leagues, and I'm in leagues where Ty Montgomery has been dropped, he has to be owned. And I really wouldn't doubt if they start. This was a weird game where they each only got five carries, but I feel like going forward, they're going to shrink the field, and these guys could have value going forward. I think that both of these running backs are more playable than every wide receiver. Is that crazy? Ty Montgomery's getting touches. I promise you that. They will force it. Like if you look at this game where Aaron Jones started off the game running well, and when they went down, Ty Montgomery came into the game and was getting drives and factoring in, and they wanted to get him going. They think that he's this guy that's I'm trying to make it compare, like a Julian Edelman or some shit like that, like some hybrid game changer. And I don't know. He's going to get his work.
I think I agree that he is. I think that's dumb. I own Ty Montgomery, and I'm on the team feed Aaron Jones because I think he's good. but it's hard to say, really. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with either one, really.
Yeah, I would be fine with potentially starting either of them going forward. I want Ty Montgomery all over the place just because they're just going to go to – and I've said it every podcast. McCarthy's been a run-first guy until Aaron Rodgers forever. And it's just going to shrink the field. It's going to be all over the middle. It's going to be the Cobb, Montgomery, Aaron Jones show, hopefully. But whatever.
Yeah, that's fair.
Turned into a fantasy wasteland fucking quick.
Yeah, very, very quick. The Packers certainly have not returned the value that we thought they would going into the season, and I don't think that's really going to happen. The last thing that we've got here is the Bucs. We kind of talked about it before. We're not really big fans of anyone outside of Evans in the passing game. And then it's worth pointing out Peyton Barber got more work than Doug Martin this past week. That backfield is also fucking stupid. No, you can't trust anyone. It's just a terrible place. Do you have any other opinions on the Bucs?
No.
All right, man. I feel like we've probably done enough.
Way too much for anything. Also, if you want to talk about the Bucs, I'll talk about Eric Bledsoe trade if you want. After the podcast.
Yeah, you know what? Let's wait till after this podcast, and then we can discuss the Milwaukee Bucks and how good of a trade that was for the goddamn Milwaukee Bucks. But anyway, we'll see you guys next time. We got the preview coming up later this week. It is going to be your favorite combination, way better than myself and Rogers. It's going to be Don and Vinny. It's going to be the Voncast. And keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming at you Thursday morning. Part 2 will be Friday morning. Make sure you guys are subscribing, downloading, reviewing if you like us. And make sure you're sending in the questions. We didn't answer any tonight. We do answer them via email all week. We'll answer them on the podcast later this week. So keep an eye out. And, for Rogers, I'm Walsh. And later, podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.